Right now, we're going to kick off with the Irish Independent this morning. The back page here is the main picture that you'll see there is Katie Taylor at Fenway Park as she announces, it's all about Fenway Park these days, as she announces some upcoming bouts. WBA and IBF World Lightweight Champion Katie Taylor with a couple of other boxers there at Fenway Park. Let's not worry about them, it's Katie is our focus. But McClean must fizz or fizzle out. Says Niall Quinn. This is in relation to the Stoke player's spat with a couple of his teammates half-time in their 3-0 defeat at the hands of Wigan during the week. So a lot of coverage of that today. Niall Quinn, as I said, was out in front of the media yesterday and saying that it kind of strikes me that this is one discussion that's broken down on sort of generational lines. Like McClean is an old school sort of studs in footballer who I think people who are a bit more old school about the game have a huge amount of time for. I can also see a lot of sort of modern footballers, particularly, and this might be the key point in this conversation, not having him on that very basis. Yeah,
well, there's a lot of people not having him for a variety of reasons, but just breaking him down to the actual footballer that he is. Like, I think there is still a very modern role for James McClean in any football team, right? Like, I think that his, can we call it a regression in club form? I think it's fair to say that it is a regression, isn't down to football moving in a brand new direction. I think it's more down to his own form, and I think he's just not living up to what he was even 3 years ago, and certainly not living up to what he was at the very start of his blistering Sunderland career. So he's right, Niall Quinn, that he does need to find a spark, a fizz, as he says, very, very soon. The whole spat thing, and I see Graham Souness is making the point from the same Virgin Media launch yesterday, that it shows a bit of passion in the team. Like, I'm not sure if you want your players to show passion via fighting with their teammates, but I guess it is some sort of pride in oneself, in results, in performances. Like, it's very hard. Because you can argue the opposite too, right? You can say, listen, it's half-time in the game, leave this until the game is done. Sort of, there's a correct way to challenge a behaviour that he sees as whatever amongst some of his teammates, maybe a lacking in desire or whatever it might be. That's kind of why I say it's not really so much to do with him as a player, but he's old school in his approach. Like, I can see why Graham Souness and Niall Quinn are kind of saying, oh, this is the sort of balls that Stoke City need. Yeah, but like, one of the players in the spat was Ryan Shawcross. Like, if you ask me to name the top 5 old school footballers around at the moment in the Championship, Ryan Shawcross is probably going to be one of the people you pick out. So to think that, you know, Ryan Shawcross is like a new age sort of footballer who's got a thin skin and is sitting there cowering behind, I don't know, whatever sort of defence mechanism he has in a dressing room while James McClean is screaming at him, is a nonsense idea. Like, this was a two-way street here. This was very much... Three-way street, I think, by all yeah, it was. The third player's name escapes me. Oh, it was the keeper.
Butland, is it?
Butland. Yeah. So, like, Butland as well, you would imagine is quite a fiery character. You can only judge by his body language sometimes if the wall isn't in the right position or something like that. But certainly Ryan Shawcross is a fiery character. It's not like James McClean is bullying teammates or anything here. This is just conflicting characters potentially, but also in a very passionate environment, which, you know, being bottom of the Championship or close to the bottom of the Championship creates. Yeah. And if he starts to play well, as Quinn points out, all of that nonsense is sort of forgotten. And well, all of that nonsense might be seen as an instigator for that. It's like, remember the dressing room spat? That was the moment that changed James McClain's season. Turned Stoke season on. That's what happened there. But the chances are that that might not happen. Also in the Irish Independent, Tyrone native Tally taking charge in Down is that story that we mentioned just a few moments ago. And Portrush surpasses expectations with open sellout. Writes Brian Keogh here that the 2019 British Open, which will be held at Royal Portrush in County Down, has already been sold out by the looks of things, which is, to be fair, not all that surprising, I guess, given that the enormity of the tournament coming to this island, but good news for them. Absolutely, and I think the golfing summer next year is already something that people are looking forward to in terms of 2019 as a sporting year because of how Tiger has finished the season. Of course, we still have the Ryder Cup to negotiate before then, and if Tiger makes a US team, which I dare say he's probably going to get a wild card, then obviously that makes it the next best thing that we're going to have coming up. But certainly the discourse has all been around next year, Augusta 2019, and if Tiger gets himself in contention once again, it's like anybody who didn't buy a ticket for Portrush, he's like, damn it, it's on our doorstep and I don't even have a ticket to watch one of the greatest sports people of all time tear it up on a course here in Ireland. It's great. It's perfect timing for Portrush to be hosting it. Yeah, and Limerick, of course, and he's a huge... he'll be off to Adair next year. 2020. 2020. And he's a huge Limerick hurling fan, as we know. Yeah, he said it was pretty neat, wasn't it, that they won
That's
the
what he
All-Ireland?
said, is it?
And to be honest with you, it was pretty neat, Limerick winning the All-Ireland.
JP took him to a game at some point. We're not sure what game that was. The Irish Times sports section this morning leads with City old boy Quinn takes a little pleasure in United's pain. So this is Niall Quinn with a nice old school photograph of him there, taking ironing his. Seems to be back to front iron. His old Manchester City shirt, but he's pretty pleased that United are in the doldrums. I mean, I don't know if that's. I think we're getting a bit carried away with ourselves. We're saying
Doldrums is a bit strong, isn't it?
I'm saying that clearly. Wiltshire ready for emotional Arsenal return. Celtic grew concession of another soft goal. This was the 1-1 in the Europa League last night. That's kind of a bit of a best flavour of what's going on there. Reflections on it. Were you reading that 1979 piece? John O'Sullivan, papal visit brings back sporting memories. Am I throwing that one at you?
Very briefly, it was just that was like the first year of Nicky Lauda's retirement. Mikey Sheehy scored 2-6 in an All-Ireland final when Kerry hammered Dublin. There was a couple of other things as well from the last year. Like it's really showing the impact of what this visit is happening when it's actually penetrating the sports pages. Like it's the last time the Pope was here, what was happening in the sporting agenda. I guess there's an interest in that. I read the piece anyway, so there clearly was an interest in that. Any bit of nostalgia, I think, kind of piques the interest.
I was 2. I remember it well.
Yeah. Did you go and support? Did you boo? Did you have a placard?
I did, absolutely. I scowled. I shat my nappy. I was that obsessed with the Pope. The Irish Examiner this morning.
Wearing nappies at 2. Is that a thing? I don't know, actually.
Yes, no, it is. Yeah.
Jeez,
I mean, thereabouts, yeah.
Right,
it's
okay.
not unheard of.
It was actually a genuine question.
That's fair enough.
I have no idea.
We're both novices at this on, that's fine. Game changer is the headline on the front page of the Examiner here this morning. Niall Quinn is very enthused by Bazunu, Manchester City's new goalkeeper, is the splash in the front of the Irish Examiner this morning. Some reflections on the hurling as well. And Ronan O'Gara is excited by brilliant signing Joey Carberry inside. It's not yet the return on, as you know. I do love the Ronan O'Gara column in the Irish Examiner. I don't know if it's. I mean, I'm assuming it'll be back next week.
You'd like to think so. It's the first weekend of the season next week.
Yeah, but I mean, it's these deals sort of come and go, and when they go, you don't necessarily hear all that much about them.
It's a good point.
But Simon Lewis writes in the Irish Examiner that Ronan O'Gara believes Munster's summer capture of Ireland fly half Joey Carberry from Leinster is a brilliant signing, and the number 10 jersey is his to lose. In a statement, I would have thought of the blindingly obvious.
Yeah, it's quite obvious. Just on that other story in the front of the Examiner there, the Bazunu thing, when he talks about game changer, he's obviously referring to how this might be the future for Irish players, and maybe he can reopen those floodgates to a certain extent. But I think it's also game changer in the sense that Gavin Bazunu is going to be allowed to complete his leaving cert next year and then go to Manchester City. Like, we've spoken quite a lot on the show over the past couple of years about how academies are not killing the soul of football, but they're also killing a lot of young players' dreams. That you're in there too early, you're not allowed to develop as a human before you're allowed to develop as a footballer, and actually completing his schooling is a necessary step for any human development, I guess. And it's great that Manchester City have that kind of ability to just say to him, listen, you go do your thing for a year and we'll catch up next year, sort of thing, which is a great step forward. And if more young Irish people could do that, who knows where they might go in the English game, because certainly when you look at all the best Irish players, like the best Irish player in the Premier League right now, Seamus Coleman, fully formed man almost when he went to England, so the older they're going to England, the better, I think, and his league round experience is key, and I guess having that leaving cert on the back burner as well is never a bad thing. Hard to see that it could become a template is the only difficulty. That it's probably due to a whole set of circumstances in terms of and I'm guessing here, but in terms of how Manchester City are stocked at academy level or at underage level, that they don't need him. If they needed this guy, he'd probably be going over there. I mean, it's a set of circumstances that works out incredibly well for Gavin Bazunu, but I think on the flip side that it's probably an outlier as opposed to the rule, but fair play to him. Yeah. The Irish keeper for the next sort of quarter of a century right there. Yeah, let's put it down at a happy old 25 years there for Gavin. Right, that is the Irish Examiner this morning, and the back page of the Times Ireland edition this morning is a photograph there of Olive Foley, who was making a speech at the RDS yesterday as part of the World Gathering of Families this weekend. The widow, of course, is the former Munster and Ireland rugby legend Anthony Foley, who had some very moving words to say at that gathering yesterday, and Ronan O'Gara was there as well. An emotional Ronan O'Gara, it has to be said, at that event yesterday. Souness and Quinn vouch for McClean, so this is just more reflections on that press conference yesterday. Writes Gary Doyle, that is the Times Ireland edition this morning. The Examiner's done. The Racing Post
In the bag, potent West Brom can outshine Borough. This is the championship meeting tonight from quarter-day kick-off there. And one to bring you, we mentioned this one from the Irish News this morning. If you just check out on the right-hand side there, I think as you look at it, McKenna, rumours going wild is the piece that's written here. It's a pretty good scoop, I think. I mean, I don't know if we call it scoop. It's a wild rumour, as the headline itself puts. Mickey Hart's become famous for pulling rabbits out of the hat, writes the article ahead of the All-Ireland finals. But the latest speculation would trump them all as he prepares to, he's sent out to Australia for the AFL player Conor McKenna, who's set to hook up with the squad ahead of next weekend's All-Ireland final with Dublin.
That's remarkable. That is remarkable. Like, that is one hell of a rumour, one hell of a story if it turns out to be true. Like, there's so many different ways to kind of think about this. Like, first of all, is Conor McKenna good enough to come straight back into an inter-county setup? B, is he good enough to play in an All-Ireland final? And C, imagine if he is, how would you feel if you're one of the squad members or one of the team members and you get dropped for Conor McKenna, or you're not getting a game because of Conor McKenna? How would you feel? Of course, everybody will feel great if it contributes to winning an All-Ireland. But you do suspect that the reason why they're bringing him back is whatever approach Tyrone are going to go with next week doesn't necessarily require somebody who's going to have to be that sharp after a season full of inter-county football. They want an athlete. They want somebody who is
a bulldozer, essentially.
A bulldozer, or, you know, stopping a bulldozer on the Dublin team. So you look at some of the man-marking jobs, and I was just, like, it's fascinating thinking about it, because obviously Padraig Hampsey is Tyrone's best man-marker, so he'll probably be on Kieran Kilkenny. And then you're like, actually, the rest of the Dublin team are pretty good. So they've used up their best man-marker on Kieran Kilkenny, whose movement is so good, who could just bring him out to the wing. Tyrone, when you go down through the list of other man-markers, aren't amazing. Like, the Kieran Kilkenny could have an amazing role in this game by doing nothing at all, by pulling Hampsey out of the game. So they're obviously trying to recruit as much as possible when it comes to setting up a good defensive system that will mark out a couple more Dublin players. Is Conor McKenna one of those players? Well, like, we don't know, do we?
Yeah, like, it's the article talks about sort of the rabbits out of the hat that Mick Hart has pulled previously, the McMahons especially being utilised in the full back line and all this kind of thing. But I mean, it is slightly different. It's vastly different to that, really. It's, I mean, you said your middle point there was the three things about it were how he might be deployed as a player, but I think you're spot on to suggest that actually a player, any sort of element of him with ball in hand, I'm assuming, if there's anything in this, that any element of him with ball in hand is just not really going to be a realistic thing. He's there to break up the play. Yeah,
the thing is, though, all these AFL players that go down there to Australia, they have made their name by being good football players. They get to Australia because they're physically able to handle it, and the scouts spot that. But the only reason they got any notoriety back home in Ireland is because they were good at football. Like, I'm sure Conor McKenna is one of the outstanding footballers in Tyrone, as in terms of talent, but whether or not he's sharp enough is an entirely different
we've
question.
seen obviously players come back, high-profile examples of players coming back from AFL, having played a bunch of times there. Like, you've spent all your time trying to get used to a new style, a new way of playing, a new ball, a new style, all that sort of stuff, and then suddenly somebody throws you a round ball and they're like, right, go and do your stuff. That's why I'm suggesting that I don't think he's really coming back to play football. No, it's if he is, by the way, like, I'd be astonished if there's any truth in this.
Well, I wouldn't be astonished if there's any truth in it. If they've gone ahead and printed it, they must be pretty confident in...
I'll point you to the direction of the headline, Owen, which includes both words, rumours and wild. So, you know.
Yeah,
it's a great story. It's just a wild rumour.
It is a great story. I'm like, obviously, when I saw it first, I was very, very surprised. But the next step of it actually coming through, who knows? Like, it seems that there might be some truth in the idea that Tyrone has certainly looked into it.
Paddy Tally is the other story, in the Irish News this morning. Just confirmation that he's going to take over from Eamon Burns, who left the job earlier in the year after a pretty disappointing year from a down perspective, pretty disappointing few years from a down perspective, and that Paddy Tally is the new man in town.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
We'll discuss that later with Danny Hughes.
Yeah, big blow to Galway as well, losing Paddy Tally, so that'll be an interesting one next year. Front page of the Herald Sports section is Jose the wrong one for United. So this is Richard Dunn in his new column. He says he sees the end of the line from Mourinho. It's just a bad mix, he says, in his column, everything going on at Manchester United, and he sees no light at the end of the tunnel for the Portuguese manager. Back page of the Irish Daily Mail is £2 billion bid for COP. Abu Dhabi Sheikh held talk with Liverpool chief. So a cousin of Manchester City owner Sheikh Mansour has failed in a stunning £2 billion proposal to buy Liverpool. We don't quite know the truth in how far this whole bid got, but there was certainly some sort of conversation with John Henry or some of John Henry's minions.
The financial advisors, it seems like they'd managed to flew to New York to speak to FSG's financial advisors about some sort of speculative thing that, I mean, I don't know. It's all a bit loose. It's kind of... They were interested. They had £2 billion, which would be the record takeover fee. But there's some bizarre language about sort of no credibility about the bid being mooted. It's kind of weird when you're talking about 2 billion, like a record takeover, but yet there's no credibility about it.
It's almost as if they're throwing around £2 billion kind of nonchalantly.
Willy-nilly, I think is the phrase.
It would be the biggest takeover for a football club. And like you would have thought that there would have been a bigger bid than £2 billion out there, but really buying a football club relatively isn't as expensive as one might think.
I mean, when you've got 2 billion knocking around, yeah, and then the several more billion you're going to have to play for, particularly at clubs at that level, for players. Like you want to have good old deep pockets. Pockets want to be hitting your socks on is what's happening there.
Yeah, like to think that players can go around for £150 million at the moment, so you can get an actual club for 2 billion is there's something wrong there in the balance of things where one employee can. Back page of the Sun is same old Arsenal. Emery hasn't toughened up Gunners. So this is Tony Adams talking about Unai Emery, saying that he's seen the same mistakes that Arsene Wenger brought to the club with Unai Emery. Just a reminder, everybody, Unai Emery has played 2 Premier League games. One of them was against the Premier League champions Manchester City, and the other one was against Chelsea at Stamford Bridge. But apparently it's same old Arsenal. So let's believe Tony Adams. He is the man of wisdom here, and my opinion on Unai Emery being the right man is clearly wrong. I stand corrected. It is just Arsene Wenger in disguise.
I'm astonished that Tony Adams doesn't come out and say, listen, this doesn't look great, but we're 2 games in, give him a chance.
Yes, like it's almost as if that like there's no such thing as a correct or false opinion, but it's very hard to argue against that theory that we are 2 games in. There is no need to panic just yet. They played 2 very, very good teams, and maybe just hold off on the whole comparing him to Arsene Wenger for just a little bit, Tony. But I stand corrected.
Maybe do something crazy like give him a season. I mean, something crazy like that.
You're like that is old school talking there. James McClean would love you as a football manager.
Rubbing off me.
Back page of the Star is Jose's X Factor. Red flops facing the chop. So this looks like Matic and Valencia being pictured here on the back page. So he's actually expected to rush them back for Monday's visit of Tottenham. So he's also considering turning to Chris Smalling for that occasion. Alexis Sanchez could also be parachuted back into the team. So who's going to miss out? So Juan Mata, Anthony Martial, Andreas Pereira and Victor Lindelof, who all struggled at the Amex, are facing the chop. So there could be as many as 4 changes for Manchester United on Monday night against Spurs. Back page of The Guardian this morning is banned for 7 weeks. Ashton left with just 1 game to grab England autumn place. Chris Ashton, once again, a tip tackle. Myself and Ger were talking about this yesterday. Like, is it possible to just like be addicted to certain acts of violence on a rugby pitch? Like, because surely the punishments are... The officiating is so good comparatively in rugby to other sports. The officiating is sometimes so harsh, and there is very much a culture of teaching somebody a lesson, but there is also very much a culture of never learning your lesson. Like, what is... Like what I don't know what Chris Ashton's problem is. Like, is it not quite easy to not perform a tip tackle?
I mean, I don't know, but it's
not like
a short story.
It's
but
almost
like,
a strange addiction to the whole process of it. It's.
I mean, look, absolutely. I don't know. It's impossible to know what happens here. That sort of ferociousness at the fever pitch of a game and all that sort of stuff. But I mean, none of that excuses doing that. I haven't seen the tackle, but it probably is fast track. He says facetiously to being the England captain, you would assume.
Yeah, like...
that sort of thuggery is exactly what they're after.
If England won the World Cup next year with Danny Cipriani, Chris Ashton and Dylan Hartley in their team, with Eddie Jones as head coach, would that be the most dislikable sports team that's ever won anything?
I mean, then what you'd have is that everybody starts sort of general thuggery. That's the way it works, isn't it?
Yeah, well, they'd be trailblazers.